The father's justice. The day my wife was buried, I found out I was worth less than the coat she left behind. I stood in the front row of that quiet room, still wearing the same black suit from the funeral, the fabric stiff against my shoulders, my hands not knowing where to rest. Ann Parker was gone. 40 years of marriage, reduced to a framed photo on a table with white flowers and a candle burning too slowly. I hadn't even had time to understand the silence she left behind before Henry Wallace cleared his throat and unfolded the will in his careful, practiced way. I remember thinking it would be simple. The house, some savings, maybe something for Victoria. That's how these things usually go. Ordinary endings for ordinary lives. But nothing about that moment felt ordinary. To my son-in-law, Nathan Cole, Henry began, adjusting his glasses. I felt it before I heard the number. The shift in the room, the way people leaned forward, the way Nathan's mouth pulled into something that looked too pleased for a man at his mother-in-law's will reading. I leave the sum of $8 million along with all investment accounts and properties. The words didn't land all at once. They hid in pieces. 8 million, all accounts, everything. I blinked, thinking I had misheard, but the silence around me confirmed it. Someone behind me let out a quiet breath. Another chair creaked. And then Nathan laughed. Not loudly, not enough to be called out, but just enough that I could hear it where I stood. Just enough that I knew it wasn't shock. It was satisfaction. I didn't turn to look at him right away. I couldn't. My legs felt unsteady, like the floor had shifted without warning. I stared at Henry instead, waiting for the rest, waiting for something that made sense. And to my husband, George Parker, he continued, his voice softer now. I held on to that moment. Whatever came next had to balance it. It had to explain it. I leave my winter coat, with the hope it will keep him warm in the years ahead. That was it. No explanation, no second page, no correction. Just a coat. The room didn't react all at once. It moved in small, uncomfortable ways. A glance here, a whisper there. I could feel eyes on my back, on my hands, on the space where I stood, trying to stay upright. Donna Reed leaned toward someone beside her, her voice low but not low enough. I always thought something was off, she murmured, like this was confirmation of a story she'd already decided was true. Victoria stepped closer, her face pale, her eyes searching mine as if I might have an answer. Dad, this doesn't make sense, she said quietly, her voice catching in the middle. She still held onto Nathan's arm without realizing it, like habit had taken over where certainty had failed. Nathan didn't say anything to her. He didn't need to. The look on his face did all the speaking, calm, assured, like everything had unfolded exactly the way he expected. I finally turned to him, just for a second. He met my eyes and gave me a small, almost polite smile. The kind you give someone you've already moved past. Well, he said under his breath, just loud enough for me to hear, I guess that's that. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My throat felt dry, my hands trembling as I reached for the back of a chair to steady myself. The coat, 8 million, the way people were looking at me. It all pressed in at once, too fast to process, too heavy to carry. 40 years with Anne, and in the end, this was what I was left holding. Not answers, not dignity, just a coat, and a room full of people who suddenly seemed to understand something about my life that I didn't. I drove home alone, the plastic bag resting on the passenger seat like something I didn't want to claim. The house looked the same from the outside, same porch light, same narrow steps Anne used to sweep every Sunday morning, even when I told her we could afford to hire someone. But when I stepped inside, the silence felt different. Not quite empty, like something had been taken out of the air itself. Her shoes were still by the door, one slightly turned inward, the way she always left them without noticing. The kitchen counter held the last grocery list she'd written, her handwriting steady, careful. The ink pressed just a little harder on certain letters. I didn't touch anything. I just stood there for a moment, keys still in my hand, listening to a house that no longer answered back. If she had really stopped loving me, if everything I thought we had was wrong, then what were those 40 years? The question didn't come out loud. It sat somewhere deeper, harder to reach, heavier than anything I could say. My phone buzzed in my pocket. "Victoria," I answered, but neither of us spoke right away. I could hear her breathing on the other end, uneven, like she'd been crying again. "Dad, I'm so sorry," she said finally. "I don't understand what Mom was thinking." "It's all right," I told her, even though it wasn't. There was a pause, then Nathan's voice in the background, low but clear enough. "Ask him if he's thought about downsizing, something more manageable." Victoria hesitated before repeating it, softer this time. "Nathan thinks maybe it might be easier for you, somewhere smaller, or one of those communities." Communities. I pictured a clean room, a narrow bed, a schedule someone else controlled. I let the silence stretch just long enough before answering. "I'll be fine here," I said. "Of course," she replied quickly, but I could hear the doubt, or maybe it wasn't hers. When the call ended, I set the phone down on the table and looked at the bag again. The plastic had a faint crinkle when I picked it up, louder than it should have been in a house that quiet. I sat in my chair, the one by the window where Anne used to read in the afternoons, and slowly opened it. The coat was folded neatly inside, navy blue wool, worn at the elbows, the lining slightly faded where her hands used to rest. I could still remember the way she'd slip it on every winter, adjusting the collar without looking, saying it was the warmest thing she owned, even when we could have bought her 10 better ones. I ran my hand along the sleeve. The fabric was rougher than I expected. Familiar, though. Too familiar. When I lifted it fully from the bag, something shifted. Not much, just enough that I noticed. The weight didn't feel even. I frowned and turned it slightly, pressing my fingers against the inside lining near the inner pocket. There it was. A small section that didn't move the way the rest did, firmer, like something had been placed there on purpose. Not loose, not accidental. My hand stayed there longer than it needed to, feeling the shape through the fabric, trying to make sense of it without rushing. Anne had worn this coat for years. I had seen it 1,000 times. And somehow, I had never noticed this before. I sat there in the quiet, the coat resting across my lap, my fingers still tracing that hidden edge. And for the first time since the will was read, a thought crossed my mind that didn't feel like grief. What if she hadn't left me with nothing? What if I had just missed what she was really trying to give me? I didn't rush it. I couldn't. The coat stayed on my lap while I sat there, staring at that one uneven place in the lining. The house was still quiet, but now it felt like something inside it was waiting, like Anne had left a question behind and expected me to find it. I got up slowly and walked to the drawer by the sink. The handle stuck a little, the way it always had, and when it opened, I found exactly what I was looking for. Her sewing scissors, small, silver, worn at the handles where her fingers had rested over the years. I brought them back to the chair and sat down again, the coat spread across my knees. For a moment, I just held the scissors without moving. It felt wrong to cut into something she had cared for so carefully, but it felt even more wrong to leave it closed. The first stitch gave way with a soft pull. I worked slowly, following the seam she must have sewn herself. The thread was tight, deliberate, not something that had come undone by accident. Every cut revealed a little more of the inside, and with each one, I felt my pulse pick up, not from fear, but from something I hadn't felt since before the will was read. Hope, or something close to it. When the opening was wide enough, I slid my fingers inside and felt it immediately. Paper, folded, firm, tucked neatly between the layers. I pulled it out carefully. An envelope. My name was written across the front in Anne's handwriting. Steady, familiar, unmistakable. But there was something different about it this time. The letters pressed deeper into the paper, as if she had needed to make sure I would see them, as if she had known I might hesitate before opening it. I sat there for a second, just looking at it. Then I slid my finger under the flap and opened it. 3 pages. The first line blurred before I even finished reading it. My dearest George. I had to blink, steady my hands, force myself to keep going. I'm sorry for the pain I've caused you these past months. I stopped. Not because I didn't understand the words, but because I did. Too well. Every cold look, every short answer, every moment she had turned away from me when I reached for her, they came back all at once, sharper now that I knew they weren't what I thought. None of it was real, she wrote. I never stopped loving you. Not for a single day. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding and leaned back slightly, the paper trembling just enough in my hands to make the edges shift. She went on, explaining in the same calm, careful way she always had when something mattered. Nathan has been turning Victoria against you. Slowly, quietly. He's been telling her, you're getting weaker, that your memory is failing, that you're becoming a burden she'll have to carry. I stared at that line longer than the others. I could hear Nathan's voice in my head, the way he spoke at dinners, the way he'd correct small things I said, not directly, never obvious, but always just enough to make me feel off balance. Anne had seen it. I didn't understand it at first, she wrote, but then I found out why. My grip tightened on the page. He has another family. The words sat there, plain and direct, no explanation wrapped around them, no hesitation. I read them again, then a third time. Her name is Erica Cole. They've been together for years. They have 2 children, Tyler and Ruby. The room didn't change. The light coming through the window stayed the same. The sound of the clock on the wall kept its steady rhythm, but something inside me shifted hard enough that I had to set the paper down for a moment. Nathan, the man who stood beside my daughter, who called me Dad when it suited him, who had just stood in that room and taken everything Anne had supposedly left behind, had another life somewhere else. I picked the letter up again and kept reading. I know this is difficult to hear, she wrote, and I know you'll want to act immediately, but you can't. Not yet. Her words slowed me down, forced me to stay where I was. I needed him to believe I had turned against you, she continued. I needed him to think he had already won. I closed my eyes for a second, remembering the way she had looked at me those last weeks, distant, irritated, almost impatient. I had taken it personally. I had thought I was losing her piece by piece. But she had been doing something else entirely. I had to make him feel safe, she wrote. Safe enough to stop hiding. Safe enough to say what he really planned to do. I swallowed, my throat dry, and read the final lines on that page. Please forgive me for hurting you. I did it because I had no other choice. I had to protect you and Victoria. I sat there, the letter resting in my hands, the coat still draped across my lap, and for the first time since she died, I understood that Anne hadn't left me behind. She had been standing between me and something far worse. And whatever she had uncovered about Nathan, this was only the beginning of it. I turned the page slowly, my fingers still unsteady, but my mind sharper now than it had been all day. Anne's handwriting didn't change, still careful, still measured, like she had taken the time to think through every word before putting it down. But what she wrote next wasn't just an explanation. It was structure. It was a plan. When I confronted Nathan, she wrote, he didn't deny anything. I felt my jaw tighten as I read that line. He told me I had 2 choices. Either I cooperate or I lose everything. The sentence sat there without decoration, no dramatics, just a fact. He said, if I told Victoria the truth, he would have me declared mentally incompetent. He's been watching me for months, writing down every small mistake. Every time I forgot something, every time I hesitated, every time I needed to check something twice, he recorded it. I could picture it without trying. The notebook, the quiet observations, the way Nathan always seemed to be paying attention, even when no one else noticed. He plans to use it in court, she continued. He believes he can prove I'm no longer capable of making my own decisions, that the treatments have affected my memory. I lowered the page slightly and looked toward the hallway, toward the bedroom we had shared for decades. I remembered those moments she mentioned, the small slips, the way she would pause, searching for a word. I had told her it was nothing, that it happened to everyone. Nathan had seen something else entirely. He didn't stop there, Anne wrote. He said he would do the same to you, George. He's been building a case that you're becoming unstable, forgetful, difficult, that, 10-ish. He wants Victoria to believe that you'll need full-time care soon. My hand tightened around the paper. He said once he has control over both of us, everything becomes simple. I read that line twice, not because it was unclear, but because it was. Simple, to him. Then the letter shifted. The tone stayed the same, but the focus moved from what Nathan had done to what she had done in response. The money he believes he's inheriting isn't mine, she wrote. I leaned forward slightly, my elbows resting on my knees, the letter closer to my face now. It came from your father. You remember the small inheritance he left. I told you I would manage it. I've been investing it carefully over the years, growing it step by step. I did remember. $50,000, maybe a little more, nothing that would turn heads. I never told you how much it had grown, she continued, not because I wanted to hide it, but because I wanted it to be safe, away from attention, away from people like Nathan. My eyes moved to the next line, slower now. It's now worth close to $8 million. I let that settle for a second, not fully absorbing it, but not pushing it away either. That money legally belongs to you, George, she wrote. It always has. I exhaled quietly. Not relief. Not yet. Just recognition that something important had shifted. The will Nathan heard, she continued, is not the real one. It's a copy I had prepared to satisfy him. He believes I gave him everything, because I needed him to believe that. I sat back slightly, the pieces starting to align in a way that didn't feel accidental. If he tries to claim that money, she wrote, he will be claiming something that is not his. That makes it fraud. He won't see it that way. Not at first. He'll be too focused on winning. I could almost hear Nathan's voice again, confident, certain, already spending money that didn't belong to him. I needed him to step forward on his own, Anne explained, to reach for it, to put himself in a position where his actions would speak louder than anything I could say. My gaze dropped to the bottom of the page. In our bedroom, she wrote, behind the loose baseboard under the window, I've hidden everything you'll need, the real documents, the records, and a small recorder. I've been keeping it with me. He doesn't know. I glanced toward the bedroom again, this time with a different awareness, not just a place filled with memory, but a place holding answers. His own words will matter more than mine, she added, and more than yours. The final lines were shorter, tighter, as if she had written them without pause. I know you'll understand why I had to do this. I know you'll be careful, and I know you'll protect Victoria, the way I couldn't, without risking everything. I lowered the letter into my lap and sat there, the room unchanged around me. Same light, same quiet, same clock, ticking on the wall. But Anne didn't feel distant anymore. She felt present, precise, like she had been standing in the middle of something dangerous and refused to step back. She hadn't been confused. She hadn't been weak. She had been building something, piece by piece, while I was still trying to understand what was happening. And now, whatever she had left behind in that bedroom wasn't just evidence. It was the rest of her plan waiting to be opened. I didn't hesitate this time. I went straight to the bedroom. The window was exactly where it had always been, the curtains half drawn, letting in a thin line of afternoon light that stretched across the floor. I knelt down slowly, my joints protesting, and ran my fingers along the baseboard beneath it. It didn't take long to find it. One section slightly loose, just enough to shift under pressure. I pulled it free. Behind it, just like she had written, was a manila envelope. Thick, worn at the edges, heavier than it looked. I sat back on the floor and opened it there, not bothering to move anywhere else. The first thing I saw was the financial records. Statements, transfer summaries, handwritten notes in Anne's neat script. I spread them out carefully, one by one, the paper catching the light as I turned each page. Dates going back years, small amounts at first, then larger ones, each investment tracked, explained, adjusted. She had documented everything, not just the numbers, the reasoning behind them. I traced one line with my finger, then another. It was real, all of it. But the money wasn't what held me there. It was the photographs underneath. I lifted the first one slowly. Nathan, standing outside a house I didn't recognize. A woman beside him, younger than Victoria. her hand resting easily on his arm. They looked comfortable together, not formal, not careful, just natural. I turned the photo over. No note, no date, just the image. The next one showed more. The same woman, Erica. I didn't need a label to know. She was laughing this time, her head tilted slightly, as Nathan leaned in close. In the background, two children ran across a yard. I picked up another. Nathan crouched beside a boy, 6, maybe 7, holding a small plastic bat. The boy's face was bright, open, completely at ease. There was something familiar in his features, something I couldn't ignore once I saw it. Another photo. A little girl, younger, sitting on a swing while Nathan stood behind her, one hand steady on the chain. She looked back at him with the kind of trust that doesn't have to be taught. Tyler, Ruby. Their names moved through my head without me saying them out loud. I set the photos down and reached for the documents beneath them. A marriage certificate. Nathan Cole, Erica Cole. Dated years before he ever stood in front of my daughter and said his vows. I flipped through the rest. Lease agreements, utility bills, school enrollment forms. His name? Her name? The children listed under both. It wasn't hidden well. It wasn't even subtle. It was just separate. A second life that ran alongside the one we thought we knew. My hand moved to the small device taped to the inside of the envelope. A recorder. Simple. No brand I recognized. Just a small switch and a single button. Anne's handwriting was on the back, in blue ink. Play this. I held it in my palm for a moment, feeling its weight, lighter than I expected, but somehow harder to ignore. Then I pressed the button. At first there was nothing, just a faint hum, the sound of a room, maybe a chair moving. Then his voice came through. Nathan. Clear, calm, familiar in a way that made my stomach tighten. She's getting older, Ophelia, he said. You can see it. Victoria's not the same anymore. She's demanding, always talking about the future like we're supposed to build something together. There was a pause. I could almost hear Anne breathing on the other side of it. I already have a future, he continued. With Erica, with my kids. That's my real life. I stared at the floor as I listened, the words settling in without resistance. I stayed because it made sense, he went on, because there was something to gain, but I'm not staying forever, not for her. The way he said it, flat, practical, like he was talking about a contract that had run its course. Another pause, then Anne's voice, softer, asking something I couldn't quite make out. Nathan laughed quietly. California, he said. That's the plan. Once I have the money, I'm done here. Fresh start, no baggage. I felt my grip tighten around the recorder. And George? Anne's voice again, clearer this time. A longer pause. He's not a problem, Nathan replied. He's already halfway there. Forgetful, slow. People expect things to happen at his age. Something cold settled in my chest. If it comes to it, he added almost casually, there are ways. Accidents happen. You know that. I stopped the recording. The silence that followed felt louder than anything I had just heard. I set the device down beside the papers, my hand lingering on it for a second before pulling away. I didn't feel shocked anymore. That had passed somewhere between the photos and the first few lines of his voice. What I felt now was something else, something steadier. I looked around the room, at the bed, the window, the place where Anne had stood while writing those notes, while listening to him say these things and choosing not to break. She had carried this alone. Every word, every threat, every plan he thought he was hiding. And she hadn't stepped back. I leaned forward slightly, my hands resting on my knees, the envelope open in front of me, everything laid out, nothing left to guess. For the first time since this started, I wasn't trying to understand what had happened. I understood it, and the anger that came with that understanding didn't rise all at once. It settled in, slow and deliberate, like something that had been waiting for the truth before it made itself known. Nathan thought he had already won, but if this was everything Anne had gathered, then what else had she already set in motion that I hadn't seen yet? I thought I had seen everything. until I noticed the small notebook tucked beneath the last stack of papers. It was easy to miss. Dark cover, worn at the edges, the kind Anne used for grocery lists or church notes. I picked it up and turned it over in my hands before opening it. The pages were thinner than I expected, filled with her handwriting from top to bottom. Not random notes, not scattered thoughts. Dates. Each entry marked carefully, day after day. Day 62. Nathan is getting impatient. He keeps asking when I'll change the will. I sat back slightly, the notebook resting against my palm as I read. Her words were steady, almost calm, but there was a precision to them that hadn't been there in the letter. This wasn't emotion, this was tracking. I told him I needed time, that it had to look natural. He believes me. I turned the page. Day 71. He brought it up again, pushed harder this time, said delays could cause problems. I agreed with him, told him I would speak to Henry soon. Another page. Day 78. I caught Nathan in the bathroom. He said he was looking for aspirin, but he was holding George's heart medication. My eyes stopped there. For a moment, I didn't move. The room felt smaller somehow, the air heavier. I didn't confront him, she wrote. I couldn't risk it. Tonight I moved all of George's medication into a lockbox in the bedroom. He won't find it there. I closed my eyes briefly, picturing it, him standing there, pretending, watching, waiting for a chance. Anne had seen it, not guessed. Seen it. I kept reading. The entries didn't grow more frantic. They grew more focused. Day 83. Nathan is confident now. He thinks I've accepted everything, that I understand what needs to be done. The next page held fewer words, but they carried more weight. Day 91. Tomorrow I will sign the will he wants. I leaned forward slightly, my elbow resting against my knee, the notebook angled toward the light. This is the version he believes is real, the one that leaves everything to him. A small pause between lines, as if she had taken time before writing the next part. The real will remains secured. Henry understands. He will not release it unless necessary. I exhaled slowly. There it was, not hidden, not vague. A fake will and a real one, placed exactly where each needed to be. I turned another page, but there was less writing now, just shorter entries, confirmations, adjustments, small observations. Everything leads to the same place. I closed the notebook and let it rest in my hands. For a moment the instinct was there, sharp, immediate. Call someone, take everything to the police, end it now. But the thought didn't hold. Victoria was still in that house, still beside him, still believing enough to stay. If I moved too fast, if Nathan felt cornered, I had already heard what he was capable of. Anne hadn't rushed. She had waited, watched, built something that depended on him stepping forward on his own. I looked around the room again, at the bed, the window, the empty space where she used to sit in the evenings. She hadn't panicked. She had controlled it. I placed the notebook back into the envelope and gathered the papers carefully, stacking them the way she had left them. Nothing out of order, nothing missing. Then I stood up slowly. The anger was still there, but it wasn't pushing me anymore. It wasn't loud. It was quiet. Steady. I wasn't going to confront Nathan, not yet. I was going to let him keep believing exactly what he believed, that he was ahead, that everything was already his, that there was nothing left to stop him. And I was going to watch. Wait. Because if Anne had gone this far, then the moment she had been waiting for, he was probably closer than he realized. The call came the next afternoon, while I was still sitting at the kitchen table, the envelope sealed again in front of me. Victoria's name lit up the screen, and for a second I just watched it, as if answering too quickly might change something I wasn't ready to change yet. Then I picked up. "Dad," she said, and stopped there. I could hear something in her voice that hadn't been there before. Not just grief, something tighter. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course," I said, keeping my tone even. There was a pause on her end, like she was choosing her words carefully. "Did Mom ever seem confused to you? Toward the end?" Him. I leaned back slightly in the chair, my eyes drifting toward the hallway again, without meaning to. "What do you mean?" I asked. Nathan keeps saying she wasn't thinking clearly, Victoria replied. That the will doesn't make sense because she wasn't herself anymore. He says the treatments affected her. I didn't answer right away. I could hear faint movement behind her, a door closing somewhere, maybe footsteps passing. She lowered her voice a little. But I was with her dad, she continued. Almost every day. She was tired, yes, but she knew exactly what she was saying. She remembered everything. She didn't feel confused. I exhaled slowly, keeping my eyes on the table. Your mother was many things at the end, I said, choosing each word with care. But she wasn't lost. There was another pause, longer this time. That's what I thought, Victoria whispered. I could hear the shift in her breathing. Not relief, not yet. But something starting to move. He's been acting strange, she said after a moment. Since the will, he's different. How? I asked, still careful, still not stepping too far ahead. He's on the phone all the time, she said. Late at night, early in the morning, he leaves without saying where he's going and comes back with excuses that don't quite fit. And he keeps pushing me about the money. Her voice tightened slightly on that last word. He says we shouldn't wait, she added, that there are ways to get access sooner, that we should move quickly before anything gets tied up. I didn't respond immediately. I let her keep talking. Yesterday, she hesitated, then continued, I was looking for a receipt in his jacket. I wasn't trying to snoop. I needed it for something. I stayed silent. There were tickets in the inside pocket, she said. 4 of them. My grip on the edge of the table tightened just slightly. 2 under his name, and 2 under names I didn't recognize at first. Erica Cole, Tyler Cole, Ruby Cole. She said the names slowly, like she was still testing them out loud. I asked him about it, she went on. He said it was a business trip. The other names were clients. But that doesn't make sense, Dad. Who books flights like that? It doesn't, I said quietly. I know, she replied, almost too quickly. I know. It doesn't. There was a soft sound, maybe her sitting down, maybe setting something on a table. I don't want to jump to conclusions, she said after a moment, but something feels off, really off. I let the silence sit between us for a second before speaking again. What are you thinking of doing? Another pause, then a quieter answer. I already called someone, she said, a private investigator. I gave him the names, asked him to look into it. I closed my eyes briefly. Not in surprise, not exactly. More like recognition. Anne had written it, predicted it almost word for word. Victoria wouldn't accept something that didn't make sense, not for long. That was a good decision, I said. I just need to know, she replied, one way or the other. We didn't say much after that. The conversation ended gently, like neither of us wanted to push it too far, too fast. When the line went quiet, I set the phone down and sat there for a moment, staring at the surface of the table without really seeing it. Anne had understood her better than I had. She knew exactly how long it would take, exactly what it would take, for Victoria to start asking the right questions. And now she was asking them. Not because I told her to, not because anyone forced her, because something inside her refused to accept what didn't add up. I reached for the envelope again, resting my hand on top of it without opening it. Nathan was still moving, still making calls, still pushing forward, still believing everything was under control. But he had missed something. He had underestimated the one person who was now starting to see through him. And if Victoria kept pulling at those threads, how much longer could he keep everything from unraveling? The call came sooner than I expected. Only a few days after she said she'd hired someone. Dad, can you come over? Victoria's voice was quieter this time, thinner, like something inside her had already broken. Now, if you can. I didn't ask questions. I just grabbed my keys and left. The drive felt shorter than usual, though I couldn't remember half of it afterward. When I pulled into the driveway, the house looked the same as always. Neat, still, nothing out of place. But the front door was already open. Victoria was waiting just inside. Her hair was pulled back loosely, not the way she usually did it, more like she had stopped caring halfway through. There were dark circles under her eyes, and the moment she stepped aside to let me in, I saw the table behind her. Covered. Papers, photos, folders, spread out in uneven stacks, some half open, some already falling over the edges. She didn't say anything at first. She just walked back to the table and sat down, both hands flat against the surface, as if she needed something solid to hold on to. "I got the report," she said finally. I pulled out a chair across from her and sat down slowly, my eyes moving over the documents without focusing on any one thing. "What did they find?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. She let out a short breath, not quite a laugh. "He's been married for years, Dad." The words landed heavily, even though I already knew them. I kept my expression still, letting her say it in her own way. "Erica Cole," she continued. "They got the certificate. It's real. He married her before he married me." She picked up a paper and slid it across the table. I looked down at it, long enough to make it real, not long enough to give anything away. "That means," she stopped, then shook her head slightly. "That means our marriage was never real, not legally, not anything." I didn't interrupt. "There's more," she said, her voice tightening as she reached for another folder. "The accounts, the ones we thought were ours. He's been moving money out for years, small amounts at first, then larger ones. It all goes somewhere else." She flipped through a few pages, then stopped again, pressing her fingers against her temple. "The house," she added. "He refinanced it twice, took out equity I didn't even know about. Everything is tied up, everything is stretched, and all that time." Her voice cracked before she finished the sentence. "All that time he was building something else." I felt it then. Not shock, not confusion, just a deep, steady weight settling in my chest. I leaned forward slightly, resting my forearms on the table. "I'm sorry," I said quietly. She shook her head immediately. "No, don't be. I should have seen it." "No," I said again, a little firmer this time. "You trusted him." "That's not the same thing." She looked at me then, really looked, like she was trying to find something in my face she could hold on to. "I don't even know what's real anymore," she whispered. I held her gaze for a moment, then nodded slowly. "We'll figure it out," I said. It wasn't a promise I could explain yet, but it was one I knew I would keep. She took a breath, then glanced toward the door, as if expecting it to open at any second. "He should be back soon," she said. "I told him you were coming over." I followed her eyes to the hallway, then back to the table. The papers lay between us, every lie, every hidden piece now out in the open, but not yet spoken where it mattered. We didn't say much after that. She sat there, her hands folded now, her shoulders tight. I stayed where I was, watching the light shift across the table as the afternoon moved slowly toward evening. The house was quiet, but it wasn't empty anymore. It felt like something was gathering, like the air itself was holding its breath. And as we sat there waiting, I couldn't shake the feeling that when that door finally opened, nothing in this house would ever stay the same again. The front door opened without warning, the sound of it cutting clean through the silence we had been sitting in. "Victoria?" Nathan's voice carried in from the hallway, light, familiar, practiced. "Hey, I didn't know your dad was coming over." He stepped into the kitchen a second later, still wearing that easy smile. His jacket hung loosely over one arm, his other hand reaching for the back of a chair, as if nothing in the room had changed. Then he saw the table. The smile didn't disappear right away. It stalled, just slightly. His eyes moved across the papers, the folders, the photographs, and something behind them tightened. "What's all this?" he asked, setting his jacket down a little more carefully than before. Victoria didn't stand. She didn't raise her voice. She just picked up one sheet and looked at him. "Your marriage certificate?" she said. The words landed flat. No emphasis, no drama. He didn't answer, not immediately. "That's your name," she continued, "and Erica Cole." He let out a short breath, something close to a laugh, but not quite. "Victoria, I can explain. No, she cut in, sharper now. You don't get to explain yet, you answer. The room shifted. Nathan straightened slightly, his expression settling into something more controlled. It's not what you think, he said. Then tell me what it is, she replied. He looked at her for a second, then at me, then back at the table. And just like that, the mask dropped. Fine, he said, his voice losing its warmth. You want the truth? Here it is. Yes, I'm married to Erica. Yes, those are my kids. Victoria didn't move. They're my family, he added, almost casually. The words hung there. Then what am I? She asked. He shrugged slightly. A mistake I stayed with longer than I should have. I saw her flinch. Just a fraction, but she didn't look away. You lied to me for 15 years, she said. I did what made sense, he replied. You think I was going to walk away before everything lined up? His eyes flicked toward the papers again, toward the will, toward what he thought was waiting for him. Which it has, he added. Your mother made sure of that. There it was. The confidence, the certainty. That money is mine, he said. By tomorrow I'll have access to it. By next week I'm gone. That was when I stood up. Not fast, not loud. Just enough to shift the space between us. No, I said. He turned toward me, irritation flashing across his face. No? That money isn't yours, I repeated. He let out a breath through his nose. George, don't. It's mine, I said, cutting through him this time. I reached into my coat and pulled out the documents, placing them on the table in front of him. Every dollar of it. He didn't touch them. He just stared. It came from my father's inheritance, I continued. Anne managed it. She grew it, but it was never hers to give away. Victoria looked between us, confusion turning into something sharper. The will you heard, I said, wasn't real. Nathan's jaw tightened. That's not possible. It is, I said. Anne had a second will, the real one, and she left me everything, exactly where it belongs. Victoria reached for the letter before I even offered it. Her hands trembled as she unfolded it, her eyes moving quickly at first, then slowing, then stopping entirely. You knew, she whispered, not to me, to him. You threatened her. Nathan shook his head immediately. This is nonsense. She was sick. She wasn't thinking clearly. I didn't respond. I just reached for the recorder and pressed play. The room filled with his voice. Calm, cold, unmistakable. She's getting older. She's a burden. Victoria's hand moved to her mouth. I already have a real family. California is the plan. Nathan took a step back. That's out of context, he said quickly. You don't know what. If it comes to it, accidents happen. The words cut through everything else. No one spoke. The recording kept going for another second. Then I turned it off. Silence settled in hard, heavy enough to feel. Victoria stood up slowly. She didn't look at me. She didn't look at the papers. She walked to the counter, picked up a small set of keys, and turned back to him. Take them, she said. He didn't move. Take them, she repeated, louder now. He bent down, picked them up, his movement slower than before, less certain. Get out, she said. Victoria. Get out. There was no hesitation in her voice this time. He looked at her, really looked, like he was trying to find something left to hold on to. There wasn't anything. He turned toward the door, stopped for a second, then looked back at me. This isn't over, he said. I met his eyes, steady, without raising my voice. It ended the moment you believed you had already won. He held my gaze for half a second longer, then walked out. The door closed behind him with a quiet, final sound. And in that silence, standing in the same kitchen where he had just lost everything, I could see it settle over him even before he left the driveway. He hadn't just lost tonight. He had been losing for a long time, without ever realizing it. The days after that felt quieter, not empty, just different. Victoria moved quickly once the truth settled. Papers were filed, signatures made, and within weeks, the life she thought she had built with Nathan was officially over. There wasn't much to divide, because there had never been much that truly belonged to both of them. What hurt wasn't the loss of things. It was the realization of how long she had been standing alone, without knowing it. Nathan didn't stay ahead for long. Word travels in ways people don't expect. Erica found out everything, not the version he told her, not the one he thought he could manage, but the full truth. The marriage, the lies, the money, the threats. She left with the children, Tyler and Ruby, and didn't look back. His job followed not long after. One meeting, one closed door, and he was out. No second chances, no quiet exit, just a statement that didn't mention everything, but said enough. He still tried, though. He filed to claim the money anyway, as if the documents didn't exist, as if the truth could be pushed aside if he moved fast enough. That was the moment everything caught up with him. What he thought was a shortcut became a charge, then a case, then a sentence. The last I heard, he was serving time, not far away, but far enough that his voice wouldn't reach us again. Victoria and I didn't celebrate it. We just moved forward. The house felt different once she started coming by more often. Not crowded, just lived in again. One afternoon, we cleared a small patch of ground behind the house, the spot Anne had always talked about but never quite got around to planting. The soil was dry at first, stubborn, but it softened as we worked it. A few days later, while digging, Victoria's shovel hit something metal. We knelt down together and brushed the dirt away, revealing a small box, rusted at the edges, sealed tight. Inside were things I hadn't seen in years. Old photographs, letters folded carefully, notes written in Anne's younger handwriting. And at the bottom, another envelope, my name on it. I opened it slowly, the paper softer than the last one, the ink slightly faded. She didn't talk about plans this time. No instructions, no warnings. Just us. She wrote about the years we had shared, about the way the house sounded in the mornings, about the small things I never noticed, but she always did. She told me she had never been afraid, not at the end, not even when things became dangerous. She said she trusted me to see it through and to take care of Victoria when she couldn't. Live well, she wrote. Not just for you, but for both of us. I folded the letter back carefully and placed it with the others. A week later, I made 2 calls. One to a travel agency, 2 tickets, same flight, no rush but no delay either. Ireland had been a plan once, something we talked about but never made real. The second call was simpler, just to Victoria. Pack a bag, I told her. We're going somewhere your mother always wanted to see. She didn't ask questions. She just said yes. Time moved after that, not quickly, not slowly, just steady. Victoria found her balance again. Months later, she met someone. Matthew Brooks. He wasn't loud about it, wasn't trying to prove anything, just present in the way that matters. I saw it in the way she looked at him, not the same as before, but not broken either. The coat still hangs in my closet. Same place, same weight. I don't wear it. I don't need to. It's not there for warmth. It's there because it reminds me that sometimes the smallest thing someone leaves behind carries the truth you didn't know you needed. So I'll ask you something. If you had been in my place, would you have spoken the moment you found out? Or would you have waited, the way she did, and trusted that the truth would come out exactly when it needed to?